The Sydney rock oyster is a native crustacean that is farmed and enjoyed by many Australians. These oysters share the same water that you and I use, right along the waterways, from the catchment areas to the estuaries. Take a moment to think about that oyster you're about to eat and how that oyster has grown, ready for harvest. Ask yourself what you can do to help keep the estuaries clean and the oysters healthy.
Estuaries are meeting places where rivers meet the ocean, and they're incredible mixing places. They're where salt water meets fresh, and not only are they diverse and productive, they're a meeting place, if you like, for people as well. They're very culturally valuable. Something like 75% of the population of Australia lives within an hour's drive of the coast or an estuary. Something like 25% live within 3 kilometres of the coast. So estuaries are incredibly productive. They have extensive habitat areas, and in these mixing zones between fresh and salt, we have salt marsh, we have wetlands. The linkages of the estuary to its floodplain are incredibly important, so the quality of those linkages determine whether or not you have a productive fishery.
The oyster has been referred to as the canary of the waterways because its health is determined by the health of the water in which it grows. There is a feeling that if the oyster industry goes, so does the watchdog of estuary health, our oyster farmers. They are the ones looking out for water quality, as it is in their best interests to keep their oysters healthy. Much like third-generation oyster farmer Rex Marks, who is also the coordinator of the Shellfish Program of New South Wales.
We sample a lot of sites, all our harvest sites. They go through a classification process where they're classified as to the standard of water that's there. Some areas are prohibited areas, you don't harvest from there at all. Some areas are direct harvest areas where we can harvest oysters straight from the estuary, straight through to the consumer with no on-treatment, and it's safe to do so. Our program's based on predictability, and we monitor it very closely with water tests and oyster meat tests. We test the water for fetal coliforms, and we test the oyster meat for E. coli. On top of that, we do algal tests, we do phytoplankton and biotoxin tests on a monthly or fortnightly basis. So our testing is fairly intense, and through that program we're able to assure the public that if they buy oysters through a reputable supplier, that they will be safe to eat. Oysters are filter feeders, and they're a static crop, they don't move around. So if adverse water trespasses onto the leases, onto the oysters can't get away from it.
The oyster isn't the only marine creature that is under threat. For 60,000 years, generations of Aboriginal people have used the rivers and estuaries as a focus of life and a source of food and medicine. The Aboriginal use of the estuaries for their food is alive and well today. However, the quality and abundance of certain foodstuffs has declined significantly. Uncle Martin Ballingarry, a respected member of the Gumbaynggirr people, has lived most of his life along the Nambucca River and has seen the impact of the poor water quality on the fish and wildlife.
Modern time, the waterway is still important to us because it's used just not only just recreational. We combine the recreational as well as hunting for food and thing, and the educational process all in one, So it's got multi-purpose with us, Aboriginal.
Typical estuary foods include oysters, cockles, fish and cobra, or gugu. Cobra is a type of woodworm that feeds inside timber along the riverbanks.
This is the narraganin, what you put on yolk, and this is the meat, edible meat, that's the part you eat. And you got a lot of splinters on it, but you master it. That's one of our main staple diet, and we still do it. It's the only food that we can practically get on the river that is a little bit plentiful, because nobody else eats it. Only black people eat it. That is disappearing mainly because of what the farmers put on their farms. I suppose they The banana growers that used to be up that Mattock Creek there, they used to, the runoff used to go down the river and stuff all the carbonate getting into the log, you know. We guessed there was something wrong, but we didn't know where it was. See, we're not very scientifically, we don't know all about the chemical stuff. But we know they must be putting something up that creek there to come into the water where there was plenty cobra before, see? Google. But no more now.
Much like the cobra, if pollution controls aren't implemented, the demise of the oyster is likely. Over a 3-year period, the oyster farmers have their stock planted in their water paddocks, unable to move their stock if contamination seeps in from the catchment.
On a local basis here, our biggest polluter has been acid sulphate soils, but in saying that, it's not our only polluter. Anything that enters the waterway that's foreign will have an effect on the ecosystem, and we rely big time on a healthy water system. No healthy water, no oyster farming. Because we've had development, you've got accelerated travel of stormwater. We're getting a lot of pollutants coming in from urban areas, down to from the people that spray for their army worms, to the people that has a backyard garden that's using chemicals, through to dog faeces, through to washing the car, organochlorides in detergents. That all has a major impact. If we could wind the clock back, we would have some fairly large riparian zones around the estuaries, and this would help protect that. Nature can take care of a fair bit if it's given a fair go.
If you look at the 3 estuaries that we're focused on, the Nambucca, the Macleay and the Hastings, Nambucca has a catchment area of something like about 1,400 square kilometres, and its headwaters are about 50 k's inland, and so the tidal pool, if you like, of the estuary actually extends up to Bowraville, which is about 28 kilometres or something inland from the entrance. But if you go to a system like the Macleay, where the entrance is at Southwest Rocks, the tidal pool extends 55 kilometres from the entrance up to just past Kempsey, and then the upper catchment of the Macleay is in fact up on the tablelands in sheep country near Armidale.
Unsustainable land use practices throughout the catchment are not the only contributing factors to the health of the oyster. Industrial and urban development, including chemical runoff, stormwater pollutions, domestic waste and water usage also play a part in the decline of the oyster industry.
The biggest effect of pH is acid sulphate soils. You know, we did have creeks here prior to remedial work that were presenting at pH 3, pH 4, which is nearly pure acid. Some of those creeks were producing up to 40 tonne of acid per week direct into the estuary, and the acid itself is a big enough problem, but the secondary effects of producing acid are even a greater problem. Acid will dissolve heavy metals out of the floodplains, transport that to the estuaries. You've got high levels of iron flux, high levels of aluminium. Not only are they damaging to the marine environment and our oysters, but they're damaging to just general health of the public. Some of those waters become so toxic they're not fit for human contact.
Are we able to lessen the impact and allow nature to help heal the damage we have brought about? Landholders, industry, councils and community groups are now taking measures to improve the quality of catchment runoff through managing streamside vegetation, restoring floodplain wetlands and managing floodgate drains.
The point source stuff, that is regulated, things like our sewage treatment plants, things like intensive animal industry sort of businesses, those things are relatively, reasonably well under control. It's really what we call diffuse source pollution. It's the sort of the general catchment stuff that there is no regulation.
Through federal, state and local government incentive schemes, efforts are being made to curb the problems of diffuse pollution into the catchment areas. Local land care, together with the Northern Rivers Catchment Management Authority, help drive this process. It is now mandatory for building developers to adopt sediment erosion control measures to reduce the amount of loose soil pouring into the stormwater drains and seeping into the estuaries. The runoff is high in nutrients and full of sediment that smothers the marine life. Accelerated riverbank erosion is a common problem in our estuaries. Work is being done by Landcare, councils and the community to improve riverbanks by replanting streamside vegetation, stabilising banks, stock control and responsible recreational and commercial use of waterways. Thor Asso from the Port Macquarie Hastings Council has worked closely with landholders in remediating their land for the benefit of the farmers and for the environment as a whole.
I can see a large improvement than 20, 30 years ago. There's a lot more awareness and understanding of the value of rivers and how important they are to not only landholders but to everyone downstream and the general community.
I think there are some excellent sort of attitude changes, if you like. Like if we take the dairy industry, they're looking at improving their laneways, their creek crossings, they're getting off-creek watering troughs, they're fencing off their creeks.
Different issues, there's a sort of strategy set up to deal with certain areas. People like council and state governments will be approaching landholders to try and work up a partnership to try and fix up the land or reduce the acid discharge going out to the rivers.
I haven't seen it go from tall, reedy wetlands.
Barry Barr bought his property Sunnydale with a nasty acid sulphate scalding where 15 to 20 acres of land were unusable.
In conjunction with our local Landcare group and the council, we got a grant and they done an acid sulphate study of the area, recognised the dangers and came up with a strategy to combat it, which was a levee wall built around it and cover the thing with water, keep them damp. And I've seen a complete reversal of the scalding back now to wetlands that's got plenty of bird life on it and a lot of soft rush and cooch growing on it. And we now have came from a situation of having a barren desert to a nice wetland area whereby when it drains out and dries in a hot summer drought period, we can put cattle on there and get some very effective grazing from it.
Russell Estuary, a beef cattle grazier in the Clybucca region of Kempsey, also encountered a major acid sulphate scalding on his property. With the assistance of the state and federal governments, Russell has turned his property around to being a wetlands paradise and at the same time a productive farming property.
Shortly after we come here, we went into a major drought, 93-94 drought, which is the second worst drought in the history of this area. And we had a major acid scald of some 300 acres on our place and 200 acres on adjoining properties that sort of turned into a moonscape. Mainly it was the fact that the flood mitigation drainage had allowed the water table to drop to unsustainable levels. Being a back swamp area, this area needs to maintain a very high water table. If that water table drops down too far, as what happened in the drought time, it creates a major acid sulphate problem.
Rehabilitation was achieved by introducing water back into the system, using a ponding technique and eliminating stock from these fragile areas. The Estuary's management regime closely resembles the natural wetting and drying cycle of this massive back swamp country.
This place is running a lot more stock than it could possibly run before. Condition of stock is chalk and cheese. There's benefits all around. When something benefits, a property, it benefits all the way through down to the downstream, the runoff area. From here our water runs down into the lower catchment where the oyster farms and so on are. Their water has got to be a hell of a lot better now than it would have been previously.
Fourth generation dairy farmer Chris Eggett from Wauchope, New South Wales began the conversion to organic dairy farming in 2000 after deregulation and at the start of the drought. Previous to this, They ran a high-input, high-production conventional dairy farm. Converting to the organic farming system required a lot of hard work, mistake-making, attitude changes and a steep learning curve with considerable success and unexpected benefits.
Sort of focus more on like recycling of nutrients, like trying to have any waste is bad. I mean, there's still a little bit, but we're working on that to improve that all the time. So yeah, whatever hay or grain we buy, we see that now as like a fertiliser, not so much as just a feed, because what it comes out the back of them, we get to put back down on our farm, because nutrient goes off in milk all the time. You know, so we're putting back this sawdust and that, which is improving our organic matter on our farm, which feeds the microbes in the soil, which make the nutrients for the plant. The organic matter helps your water retention as well, your nutrient retention, so that's all good, like for water saving and that sort of thing. This is the finished compost here, made from the dairy yard and sawdust, and also we add wood chip to it, which is before we put it on the paddock, we take the wood chip back out of it using this trommel here, so the fine bits obviously come through, and then the wood chip we put back into the piles to re-inoculate the compost. We're full-blown organic because we can sell that product as organic. Even if I wasn't organic, and now I wouldn't use the fertilisers and the chemicals and that we used before. It's more sustainable. You know, I can see a future for my kids and that in agriculture. All we cared about before was tomorrow. We're still like, you know, you still got to worry about that, but you know, I look at 5 and 10 years and 20 years, like, I suppose when I could start seeing it turn around, I was getting pretty excited about what might happen. You know, I still am, like, you know, I think in 5 years' time, you know, I mightn't be doing all this sawdust and that, there might be some better way, you know. Hopefully there is.
There is a role for state and local government managing coasts and estuaries in New South Wales. Policies that relate to development in the coastal zone, whether it might be clearing trees or moving soil, have strict guidelines as part of the development application process. You can apply for these applications through your local council.
We have a multiple role as a council in itself. There's a regulatory and planning control role, which has always been a traditional role of council. But now these days, council takes on more of a proactive role to deal with natural resource management.
Policies provide guidelines, if you like, as to what direction we should head. But I think the power is in the broad land use planning process to ensure that we have appropriate zonings and appropriate protection, I suppose, for these big physical features.
The area that we have to regulate or have an authority over is quite large, obviously. So we often rely on users of the waterway or concerned residents to actually bring issues at hand to us, and then we can go and investigate.
It's a partnership arrangement between state, local, and with funding sources too. I mean, it's not only state and local governments, also federal government as well contributes through, say, the local catchment authorities funding to achieve certain targets. So there's a lot of emphasis these days on coast and marine type issues.
The responsibility does not only lie with the governments to regulate farmers to change their methods and industry to adopt pollution reduction measures, it's also up to you and me.
There's lots of things landholders could do in the urban setting, making sure their boat and car wash doesn't enter stormwater drains, dealing with water tanks and the like, saving water where you can, mulching and composting organic waste rather than sending it to landfill, those sort of things. There's lots of small things, but if everyone does it, makes a huge contribution.
People need to be mindful of some of their everyday practices, how they can impact on an estuary which could be kilometres away. And I think when people know what they're doing, quite often they're only too happy to change their habits and just do it in a slightly different manner when they know that they're actually helping the planet.
earth and its processes are life supportive. So when we talk about management, we really should forget about pretending to manage earth and its processes. We should really just focus on the activities, people's activities that we can make a difference with. It's what we do, where we do it and how we do it that makes a difference. But often we have all the science, we have all the policies, but without a social willingness you don't get change. And often it's the social dynamics that as resource managers we need to focus a bit more on. And I guess this resource kit's a bit about that. It's trying to help people understand what role they can play and that we all can participate, and even if it's a little thing that we do, it all contributes to a worthwhile endpoint.
The next time you tuck into a plate of oysters grown in your own backyard estuary, think about how you can contribute to keeping your local rivers, creeks and estuaries clean. Not just for the oysters, but for the enjoyment of everyone, now and into the future.